If the final preseason game reminded us of anything, at times it could be a real struggle this year for the Utah Jazz, but all in the name of learning. It's next on Locked on Jazz.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz. It is your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps and on YouTube. Please subscribe and follow. If you're on YouTube, hit that bell button. Everydayers, you're the best. I cannot thank you enough. Here's what we got today. It is day one of points gained, which is an offensive metric system that I've built over the last decades to look at what teams will be good offensively this year. And then we try to kind of figure out where they're going to be defensively. It also does some really interesting things where it tells us if teams have too many possessions, they're going to start fighting amongst themselves for possessions. We'll look at that. The Jazz come out better than you might imagine. But where we're going to start today is that tough one in Portland to wrap up the preseason, and maybe appropriate that that's what wrapped up the preseason. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the official sports book of Locked On. Make sure that you get your place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So the Jazz just got blasted in Portland, and what really happened is they couldn't score at all. And, you know, the preseason has been a wonderful stepping stone for Walker Kessler, a wonderful stepping stone for Keyonte George. I think, you know, we're watching Lauri try to get better and do more things and learn and obviously watch all the rookies. I thought Portland came out a little bit like, let's prepare for this game with a regular season game plan and let's get after it. And I thought it was symbolic in the first two possessions of the night when Portland came out and had Kamara guarding, who's 6'8", guarding Keyonte. So, like, to me, that immediately said, we have a game plan. We're trying to do specific things in this game and not only just check it out for preseason. The other one is he picked him up at, like, 65 feet. This was the book on Key in the second half of the season last year, was that the handle wasn't so good that he could get through pressure, and that slowed us down. We were one of the slowest teams in the NBA last year in moments to action. There's a stat that they keep in which you look at the Jazz, and they were 26th in the league at crossing half court, 29th in the league at getting to their first action, and then 18th in the league in possession time, which really means that, like, they were so rushed at that point that they kind of rushed through it. So I think when you see like that game plan from Portland, they came out to get the Jazz. I don't think the Jazz had that same kind of vigor. They'd played that really, really good game previously in the preseason, and I think that was their signature game of the preseason. And so, but I thought there were a bunch of things that showed up in that. One, Donovan Clingan came to try to prove he should be the starting center for the Portland Trailblazers against Walker Kessler. And Walker just hasn't played a lot of guys that are that much bigger than him. And boy, is Donovan Clingan is big. Like the first, if you listen to our play-by-play call that night, one of the very first things I said in the entire night was, wow, does Walker look small? So here was this, I thought, super interesting kind of matchup early. The other thing that I saw out of Portland, I mentioned this on Postcast with Ron Boone, which will bring you after every game, was that when Lauri's putting the ball on the deck, teams are coming, at least Portland came off him, and they even did something that to me was really like a signature that under all circumstances they were going to do this, which was they came off strong side corner. Kind of a known rule in this league is you never come off strong side corner. Lauri's been better the last 2 years at 1.9 and 2 assists a game, but it's pretty clear that Chauncey Billups and his staff came in and were like, yeah, he doesn't pass. The minute he puts it on the deck, he doesn't pass. And right now he doesn't. Because what's he trying to work on? How to make those isolation moves, how to get that strength, how to develop that skill. And then teams are now saying, okay, well, that's if you're going to do that, we're not going to let you pass. And these are all the moments that I think we're going to see this season that when you're down 40 against Portland, you're just kind of dismayed as a fan. Like, I got it. But I actually think we're going to see a lot of those kind of moments this year in which players and teams do things to us. And the question is going to be not whether Keyonte can handle that pressure, but whether Keyonte can handle that pressure better the next time. Whether anytime we see Lauri suddenly make the pass to the wing, that's a step of progress. And these are the things that we're going to have to watch this year. Because the truth is, I see this a little bit in points gained. Unless you really ride Jordan Clarkson and Colin Sexton, we don't actually have enough offensive possessions right now. So in points gained, one of the things I do for my analysis is I use Kevin Pelton's numbers projections, and then I look at how many possessions everyone's going to use. And so we come to 103, which is the right number. That's like, you want to be right there. Anything over 110, and I'll get into this a little bit in the next segment, it gets worrisome. Anything under 90 gets worrisome because now everybody has to do like 12% more and they can't do it. So we actually come out just right at 103. But that's with John Collins using 15 scoring opportunities and playing 26 minutes a night, just like he did last year. Early signs of preseason is that number might be down to 20, and then John Collins' number comes down to probably 9 possessions or scoring opportunities. Colin Sexton, 15. Like, there's just, and like Jordan Clarkson, played 30 minutes last year, used 16 possessions. I think he's much more of a 20-minute player this year. And so you're suddenly getting 11 possessions out of 11 or 10 possessions out of Jordan Clarkson. And so if at that point, any kind of guys being off for a night or injured, we're going to be pressing guys beyond their natural level. Like Isaiah Collier, Cody Williams suddenly trying to use, and Taylor Hendricks trying to use more than 7 possessions a night is going to be a real push for them. And that's, now I'll show you in a minute, we actually come out relatively okay offensively. And as much as like you leave that game the other night feeling like offense is going to be a real struggle, when you couple the fact how efficient Lauri is, how efficient Colin is, how efficient John is, and how good a coach Will Hardy has been, maybe we don't come out as a struggling offensive team. We've never been that under Will, right? Like if there's been a signature to Will Hardy, it's been he has figured out how to maximize the offensive prowess of this team. Obviously, last year in the second half of the season, it wasn't as good, but last year the offense was 17th in the NBA and much higher than that halfway through the season. The year before that with Will, it was the 10th best offense in the NBA. So Will's got it figured out how to coach an offense, and I think we'll still be able to see that, but we are getting pressed. So that's kind of what my message to this would be, is we're getting pressed. And each of these guys is probably going to be pushed a little bit beyond. We're going to ask Lauri to do a little bit more, Colin to do a little bit more, Cody, Isaiah, Kyle, all of them to do a little bit more. And there's going to be some really tough moments. And I think for the first time under Will Hardy, we could see the offense have some super bad nights. But that's fine. That's part of that's what this year is. That's the development. And the thing that's going to be tricky, and we'll do this here on Locked On Jazz with you every day, is trying to figure out how do we look at it in a manner so that we take, Cody Williams got 6 shots off in the half court tonight. That's awesome. He went 2 for 6. Who cares? Lauri Markkanen dished out 4 passes for shot attempts. That's actually the number I want from Lauri, is potential assists. Not assists. I don't care about assists on Lauri. I want potential assists. In other words, how many times does Lauri Markkanen make a pass to someone where they actually take a shot? That, to me, is a far more important number for his season than whether he ups his assist number to 2 or not. Like, I think we'd like to see his, fine. But, like, what's the next one? All right. So that's where we are. Points gained, thanks for sticking with this, is my offensive metric system I built over the years. It used to be called, what did we used to call it? I don't remember. We had it called something else for a long time. Wow. Brain cramp. So we called it something else for a long, long time. It's now points gained. It's the concept is it's the amount of points that a player scores with the possessions that they use above what average players in the NBA would do with that possession. So, for example, on the last year, Lauri Markkanen was a 1.9. In the 18 scoring, I have it over here, sorry. In the 18 scoring opportunities that Lauri gets a night, he averaged 1.9 points more than the average player would have in the NBA. Jordan Clarkson in 16 was minus 1.9. So they washed each other out. Jordan had a tough year last year. We'll look at all teams. Today I have about 20 teams done. By tomorrow, I'll have them all done, and we'll do our official predictions plus with 240 on that. That's all coming up on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Locked On Jazz is brought to you by Murdoch Chevy. Located in Woods Cross and in Logan, the Chevy truck is like no other. The Silverado truck gives you the best look you could possibly have, riding like a lazy boy chair above all other traffic, feeling good with endless power and cruising around. And then you've got the Tahoe and the Suburban. You've got the great lineup of SUVs. It's all at Murdoch Chevy, located in Logan and in Woods Cross. Plus, you've got the Murdoch guarantee to make sure that you get a no regrets experience. Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross and in Logan. If you're going to stop by, why don't you have me give you the VIP treatment? Feel free to stop by. Send me an email. I'll set up the meeting for you. You'll have the VIP experience, and you can see what's going on. Free ski passes with cars this time of year. It's all great stuff over at Murdoch Chevy. Email me at dlock09@gmail.com to get the VIP experience you deserve by being a Locked On every day. Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Convenient, flexible, online therapy. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. That's BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. So if you're thinking about therapy, and why would you do? Well, obviously, it can help you a great deal. I always talk about, you've heard me say this before, I view it as performance enhancing in some ways. The other one's like, is there something that, frankly, that you have fears about? Is there something that gives you anxiety, that triggers you in some capacity? How can you figure out what that is and how to deal with it better as time goes on? Because the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place and holding things back. And it's obviously the Halloween time of year, so appropriate to talk about that. So therapy can be there for you as something that can give you a performance enhancement for your brain. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. Switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA to get your therapy started and get the discount from Locked On. Thanks so much for listening to Locked On Jazz today. The newsletters, it's the debut, a little bit of a soft launch today, but they're out there. Go to LockedOnDaily.com. That's right. I'm going to check it out right now. Go to LockedOnDaily.com and sign up for your free everyday Locked On Jazz newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. The ultimate NBA newsletter. We believe it's a one-stop newsletter for you. Here's the goal. You're going to get an article on the Jazz every day. We'll get links to all the other great stories, whether it's by Sarah or Ryan or Ben or wherever it is. We're going to be one stop for you. I don't need to hide it from you. Number two, we're going to get you a national article written by Katie Hendel. We also have Mike Schreier coming and writing one day a week, who's like with Zach Lowe gone. I think Mike Schreier, kind of the way he writes is a very Zach Lowe-ish. I think you'll love it. Plus all the links to the most important national stories. And then Josh Lloyd, Locked On Fantasy Basketball, will stop by and give you the fantasy tip of the day. It's all at Locked On Daily, and it's free. So go check it out right now. All right, I just explained points gained to you to some extent. So what I do, there's two things we're looking for here. Is we're looking for what a team's overall ranking of points gained is, and that will tell us how their offense is going to rank for the season. I've done about 20 teams. We're going to kind of look at those 20 teams together today. And then tomorrow I'll wrap it up, and then we'll look at it by conference and start making predictions. And as the opening of the NBA season is tomorrow. Woohoo! So the other thing we're going to look at is teams that have too many possessions. So this happened to Boston a few years ago when guys got injured or teams add players. If you suddenly have 110 scoring opportunities, if you in a given night, you have about 85 scoring opportunities, maybe a few more. Like that's, if you go take shots and free throws and kind of look at that per NBA teams, that's kind of where you are. We're at about, I think, 85 shots a game. Well, let me just check and make sure I have this exactly right for you. Preseason is not the right way to look at this, but the regular season last year, I think the median team in the league last year, Ron always asks me this question, so I probably should have it, was taking about 90 shots a game, and then you add in, a few offensive rebounds, and you get, well, those actually all parlay together. So you end up with, as a group, by injuries and everything else, if you have about 100 offensive scoring opportunities a game, you're fine. The minute you get to 110, every player on your roster suddenly has to give back 10% of their possessions to make it so that everyone's happy. And the minute one guy doesn't do it, somebody else is giving back 20. If you go back to that Boston Celtic team where they had all the injuries and Terry Rozier and everyone got that opportunity and Hayward was out, then they all came back the next year and everyone's like, Boston's going to be great. They were a mess. So one thing that's clear to me this year is there are fewer teams that have this problem than I've noticed before. But let me give you the teams that actually do have those problems right now. And a little bit interesting, in the Eastern Conference, Detroit and Milwaukee both come out high. Detroit, it might not matter, but they did add Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway Jr. and a bunch of players who are going to expect and have always had a bunch of possessions to their Malik Beasley. And so they're actually high on the possessions, and someone like Jaden Ivey could get reduced, but Jaden Ivey's not going to be interested in that. So keep a little eye on Detroit, just in that kind of, they don't come out well. They don't look, their numbers aren't good. Their offense right now of teams I've done the Eastern Conference, only Brooklyn is worse. So it's not like Detroit's about to break through. Milwaukee's interesting. Milwaukee is at 114, which if Chris Middleton doesn't play is probably not a huge problem for them, but that's a little bit of an alarming number for them with the additions that they made of Taurean Prince and Gary Trent Jr., and like, it's always surprising. You think, well, that's not that big deal. Yeah, Gary Trent Jr. uses 13 scoring opportunities a night. And Bobby Portis wants his 13 scoring opportunities a night. And Chris Middleton gets 13 a night. And Taurean Prince gets 6 a night, 7 a night. Taurean Prince was at 8 last year. I have him at 6 this year. Guys don't like losing 30% of their possessions. So keep an eye on those two teams in the East where I think they're right now, there just aren't enough balls to go around to keep them happy. Over in the West, the two teams where this is the case is the team we see opening night with Memphis. Because of all those injuries, all those guys took a larger role, and now they don't get it. And the Pelicans are at nearly 120. This is not a good script. The Pelicans roster is at nearly 120. You've got Zion, who wants to uses about 19 a night. DeJounte Murray used 20 a night last year. You have Brandon Ingram, who's going to want his. He didn't get his money at 18 a night. CJ McCollum was at 17 last year. I have him down to 15. He's not going to like that at all. And then Herb Jones is still trying to prove himself. He wants 9 possessions tonight, or even just go off the bench with Javon Green, Jose Alvarez, Jordan Hawkins, Daniel Tice. There's just 119 possessions in that group. It literally means that every player is going to have to take 20% fewer possessions. So if Zion's using 20 possessions a night, he now only has to use 16. There's zero chance he's willing to do that. And there's zero chance that Brandon Ingram's willing to go from 18 down to 15. Well, the minute those two don't do it, someone like CJ McCollum has to go from 17 to 11. Is zero chance he wants to do that. So I would really keep an eye on the task that Willie Green has in New Orleans trying to hold a roster together. The points gain system that we run over the years has been successful. I will actually say I think it's been most successful in identifying these issues. That there's just every now and then too many possessions on a roster, and that makes it awfully hard for you to have the camaraderie and the togetherness and those kind of things. The other one I mentioned was Memphis. That's largely because of the amount of injuries that they had last year. And we'll see what happens to them moving forward and how they figure it out. But they actually do have an awful lot of players who, if all healthy, you have 3 guys in Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr. and John Morant, who are using 20-plus possessions. And then, Marcus Smart's not going quietly into the night, and Brandon Knight wants a few, and probably Zaire Williams, and that's even before trying to figure out what Zach Edey's doing. Not Zaire Williams, sorry, Vince Williams needs 3 or 4, and then how does Zach Edey fit? So keep an eye on Memphis as well. I think that's actually, as I said, one of the more interesting things that we discover when we look at these numbers. What teams look good? What's the surprise? There's one team that I have counted out for dead all year long. I ran the numbers last night, and I was like, what? This makes no sense. I'll share with you who they are next. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the official sports book of Locked On. It is also the number one daily sports book, or number one sports book. FanDuel right now has got a great deal for you. You get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. That's FanDuel.com. And the FanDuel Sportsbook's got all the NBA lines for you, with the WNBA wrapping up last night. Was pretty amazing. The Celtics are a 5.5-point favorite over the Knicks, and the Timberwolves are a 1.5-point favorite over the Lakers. We'll go into opening night against Memphis as a 4-point dog to the Grizzlies. Suns are a 4.5-point favorite to the Clippers, and the Warriors are 6-point favorite over the Portland Trailblazers in Portland. All the futures are available as well on the NBA end of things. If you want to get involved with those, who do you think the MVP will be? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Luka Doncic? You decide on all of those at FanDuel.com. Thanks very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen today. LockedOnDaily.com to get your newsletter. Click on the Jazz to get your brand new newsletter. Thank you. It's free. It'll be coming to you each and every day. All right, here are some of the numbers for teams. Again, I've done about 20 teams. We'll wrap it up. But here, start in the West, and this is the bizarre thing. I can't figure out if I have a mistake in my math, but the Clippers' offense looks amazing. One of the premises here is that you have no players that are below average. And the Clippers literally have only Chris Dunn that uses as a negative offensive player. So they're distributing all their possessions to Zubac and Norman Powell and Mason Plumlee and Amir Coffey, to above average offensive players. If Bones Highland is out of the rotation, then they literally do not have, other than Chris Dunn, who uses 5 possessions a night, a negative player on the floor. The problem, though, is they only have 80 possessions as a group. Norman Powell is going to have to jump up from 11 to like 18, and I don't know if he can maintain that efficiency without Kawhi Leonard. They have 80 possessions a night without Kawhi Leonard. But of all bizarre things, and this will be really interesting to watch because I don't believe it, the numbers just peaked the Clippers out. Seems strange to me, but the concept largely between points gained, and one of our beliefs is if all of the negative value or the negative impact of a player that uses possessions below league average is so much more significantly negative than anyone in the league realizes. And here the Clippers have put a team together of average offensive players. So far, I've done Dallas, Denver, Golden State, Houston, Clippers, Lakers, Memphis, Minnesota, Pelicans, and the Jazz. The Jazz do not come out great, but they do not come out terribly. They come out a little better offensively than Memphis, who was not good last year. They come out better offensively than Detroit and Chicago and Brooklyn. Little short on possessions we talked about, but they come out fairly well offensively with a negative 1.2. What does that mean? It means that we would be slightly below average offensively, probably 17th or 18th in the NBA offensively. And if we can be, 22nd, 23rd defensively this year, then you're going to be relatively competitive. Of the Western Conference, and again, I haven't done them yet, the Clippers were this weird thing that peaked out. The other one was Houston went the absolute opposite direction. every single player on Houston, other than Alperen Şengün, uses a possession below the league average. And they came out to a negative 4.5. It's these two findings, the Clippers and the Rockets, I'll be honest with you, have me completely buckled on whether I actually believe what my numbers say. The years past when this has happened, one of them was most noticeably, for those who remember, the everydayers out there, was when Russell Westbrook went to the Lakers and everyone had them as a favorite, and I was like, they're not making the playoffs. I looked at Houston here. This is stunning. If Jalen Green does not get dramatically more efficient, which he was in the second half of the season, but probably not real, and they're relying on Reed Shepherd for possessions and Asur Thompson, and they don't have above average offensive players. In regards to Dylan Brooks is a huge negative player. And so this was the two massive stunners to me, were that the Rockets and the Clippers were the exact opposite of where I expected. But Jalen Green's point gains last year was negative 1.5. Fred VanVleet's negative 0.4. Jabari Smith's negative 0.2. Dylan Brooks is negative 0.7. Cam Whitmore's negative 0.4. Tari Eason's negative 1. Asur Thompson was even. And rookies are always negative. So Houston, to me, running these numbers is a vastly different team than I anticipated, and I would put it as a huge red flag to what they may or may not be able to do this year in the Western Conference. It's interesting what I told you about the Jazz is I kind of opened the show today saying, hey, we could have some real offensive struggles. We could, but we didn't come out that way. Houston did. Houston came out that if Houston's not the top 5 defensive team that they were a year ago, they're in real trouble. Over in the Eastern Conference, 2 teams peaked out. Absolutely no surprise. Boston's +5. Indiana's +4.5. Actually, Boston's +5.5. So no surprise. Cleveland's +1.8. Milwaukee's +2.6. The good teams, exactly as you'd expect. Nothing wild there. Milwaukee's got maybe too many possessions. Keep an eye on it. But nothing weird has happened. The Knicks are not as good as I would have expected. They're +1 offensively. We'll see whether they hold it together. So I'll do the rest of the East for you. Tomorrow we'll have those predictions. And the West right now, Clippers are off the charts at +6.5. I don't know how that's possible. And obviously without Kawhi, it's not. And with only 80 possessions, it's not. But when they are healthy, that team looked pretty like, wow. Dallas is +4, which you'd expect with Luka and all their guys. Minnesota comes in at +2.5, which is great. Pelicans at 1.8, but a lot of possessions to keep an eye on. Lakers a little bit ahead of the Pelicans at 2.2 on that. The Warriors at 0.8. So it's going to be interesting to see. Houston really, really low. Memphis low. Jazz negative 1.2. All right. We'll look at all those. I'll have them posted on the YouTube community channel tomorrow for you as well. We'll look back at it. And then Wednesday, we'll get you ready for the opener. This has been Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Go to LockedOnDaily.com and subscribe to your free ultimate one-stop NBA newsletter. If you're on video, we're going to send you the first ever 24/7 channel, Locked On Sports Today. If you're on audio, check out Locked On NBA.